Zach, we want to ask you some rapid round questions. Are you game? Okay. These can be one word answers, they could be a sentence. We could dive in further, wherever it goes. All right. It's 2030. What's work going to look like?
Well, there's two ways it could go, right? So one, the bosses are getting the power back right now because the talent market has shifted. It was more pro employee. Now it's more in favor of employers right now. And whatever bosses do with this newfound power will change the experience of working. I'm less concerned with the future of work as I am with the future of the worker, what a person is feeling and sensing in the place where they spend a third of their lives. If it goes in the place where we go back to command and control, we treat people as replaceable, I think you'll just see another perpetual swing back to when the labor market's looser, where people do what they did in the great resignation. And we just constantly have these big points of high turnover, people staying in jobs for 1 or 2 years and leaving because they're going somewhere where they feel better. That's one way it could go. Or the other way it could go is we have a chance to redeem work. And with this new power that leaders have, they could use it to make sure people feel dignified in the place where they're spending most of their lives.
Pro redeem. Redeem
I'm
track.
pro redeem too. And I am hopeful. And it all depends on how people use their power.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. What's one thing about corporate culture you'd like to see just disappear for good already?
Symbols of people's value, like perks and awards and banquets and free meals, in the absence of daily experiences of being valued.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing can make up. There's no symbolic gesture that can make up for the daily experiences of feeling that you don't matter to the people around you. So until we get the daily experience right, the daily interactions right, in which people feel that they are valued and know how they add value, then I would love to see us stop symbolizing value and investing in all of these big perks and initiatives and team building retreats and all of that stuff in the absence of daily experiences.
Yeah.
But
Friendship
kombucha
and
is it's so much easier to just buy kombucha. Like,
It is, and give an award. It is easier. And it's well intentioned. But imagine if the symbol matched the daily experience.
different story.
Yeah.
Different story.
Much more powerful. What's the I think I know where you're going with it because you kind of just answered it, but what's the greatest opportunity most organizations are missing out on right now?
To reskill anybody who communicates with anybody with the skills to care for people again, to see people, to hear people, to show people the difference that they make, to remind them that they're needed, that they're humans. And it's so overlooked, right? That these daily experiences are what actually create culture, not the big programs and platforms. And I really want organizations to see that, because I think we all become better. The leader who's equipped with these skills feels better. No one wakes up and wants to be an uncaring leader. I don't believe that. I'm an optimist. No one wants to say, hey, I'm going to not see or hear my people today. But I think we just haven't spent the time and haven't honed the skills to care as rigorously as anything else we invest our time into in organizations.
Okay, what music are you listening to right now?
Well, I just bought tickets to see John Baptiste at Red Rocks
Hey, oh, he's
in
amazing.
Colorado.
And Red Rocks, it's so
Red Rocks,
Oh,
yeah.
best place to see a show.
So I am starting to make my way back through his collection.
Amazing.
You know
Love
the
it.
John Baptiste Christmas album that Amazon produced, or Amazon did it. The John Baptiste Christmas album, best Christmas album on the face of the planet. I actually just listened to it period. He's so freaking talented.
He's so talented, and he's so him. Like, you see him in all of these different settings, and you get the same energy from him.
Consistency. Yeah.
His wife is super talented too.
Yes.
An excellent writer.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now? Audiobooks count, by the way. So
I'm actually reading the autobiography of Pope Francis.
Interesting.
Called
Okay.
Hope. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just was really very intrigued at how he developed his ability to engage with the world in the way he did.
Any cool findings so far?
Yes, I think that the he calls it the discipline of encounter. how important encountering one another is. And I love this idea, the discipline of encounter. Put yourself in situations where you're encountering other people where they are, literally. And that's what I think really drove his work with the poor and with migrants and with people who are often unseen, unheard, unvalued, is this discipline of encounter. But he calls it making it a discipline. I often call, like, we use these terms in other areas when we talk about work. When someone says, Zach, my leader used to walk the floor, right? Or go out and walk the line, right? And that's all great. But I think that what they were getting at was this discipline of encounter, of really encountering people.
Yeah. They're showing up in their environment, not making them come to theirs.
Yeah. And I keep saying the word encounter. I don't know why right now, because I really like that word, like to encounter another person.
Now I'm
What does
like,
that
wait, what
mean?
does that mean? I mean, I know what an encounter is, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, what's the difference? What's encountering? Like, why do you?
I think that what he was getting at is you're coming to be with them where they are. It's like a withness instead of a I'm doing this to you, I'm doing this for you. It was coming alongside and being with people is what
Yeah.
he talked about a lot in the early chapters of this book.
I feel like there's like an intentionality there too, like in the discipline, right? Of that. Okay. Took me a minute.
And I
Got
like it
this.
too, like you can lead to somebody, like here's what you need to do. You can lead for somebody, I'm going to do it for you. Or you can lead with somebody, I'm going to come alongside with you. And I think that that's what encounter means to me, coming alongside with somebody.
Which is very Catholic. Footprints. Anybody? No.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, this is very well. No, I don't know that, but it is very Catholic.
Yeah. There's a. Sorry, Mel and I both grew up Catholic. There's a whole like prayer, like Jesus with the footprints, like where this guy's walking on the sorry, this is so cheesy, but this guy's walking on the beach by himself, and then he looks back and then he realizes there's two pairs of footprints because Jesus was with him. There's like a
Oh
whole
yes, I've seen
poster.
that. I've seen
Yeah.
it. I've seen that imagery. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
But I do like this withness idea, especially when it
yes.
comes to leadership.
Agree. I'll cut the footprints thing. Sorry.
Who do you really admire?
Do I admire? I mean, this is going to sound a little bit generic given what I do, but it's really true. I mean, I just came off of working on this book for 4 years, and all of the practices in the book are practices that real people actually did. Most of the time, real leaders, many of whom didn't have a position, but they chose to lead from where they were. And I really admire like the construction crew leader who chooses to take an investment in someone's future and mentors them to get to where they want to be. The cleaning crew, a leader who I interviewed with a airline cleaning crew who has one of the workers who's providing for his daughter in Ghana show her a picture of his daughter every day so she's reminded of why he's there. I admire the people that go out of their way to name people's unique gifts and strengths. I think real people doing real work in a different way.
Yeah. Was that Tanya? She was one of my favorite stories.
Tanya at the end, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how I encountered her at the end of the book. As I was finishing the manuscript, the airline asked me to go down and clean with this cleaning crew to understand why they were the highest performing unit in the airline.
Yeah, I loved that trail of her interactions with people. I like could picture I felt like I was walking with you on this little journey with her throughout the airport because that's like I could feel that interaction just through reading it.
Yeah, and that's in the conclusion. We can talk about
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
I went down there and I had a notebook out. I had a notebook with me, and I just was taking notes on. I was like, I just want to understand what it is that separates this person and this team apart from these other ones in the airline because I have to report back. And that I didn't have anything operationally to report back. I didn't have anything tactically to report back. It was only the nature of how she showed up and chose to show up in every interaction.
All right. What's one piece of advice you want everyone to know?
One piece of advice is that you don't have to go find your purpose. A lot of people talk about that. Like, what's my purpose? What am I really doing here? Your purpose is usually right where you are, waiting to be acknowledged, not out there waiting to be found. Because purpose is where our unique gifts make a unique impact. You have strengths right now, wherever you are. You're around other human beings in some facet, connected at some level today. So you have purpose right now. You make an impact right now. And the key is learning to see it and then, helping other people to see it, how they make an impact on those around them.
Yeah. It's so this really important research on TikTok that I've done. There was a woman on there
It's
who
important.
who well, her friend passed away, unfortunately, from cancer, and one of the things that she mentioned about purpose, she was like, my friend, when she got cancer, was obsessed with finding her purpose. What was her purpose for living? And then finally, when she passed away, it was something along the lines of, your purpose is just to exist and be a human. And no matter what you do, you add value, and that's your purpose, is to experience life in the way that is most meaningful for you. And she's like, and I just wish everyone knew that message, that you don't need to have this grand purpose. Your purpose already exists within you.
Yeah, I think that your greatest purpose is your presence.
Yeah, agree.
Because that's where you are. That's where you are right now with the people you're around, and you are impacting them in, two different ways potentially. But that's your purpose.
Love it.
Great.
All right.
Taking it back to leadership, honestly, like as I'm thinking about it now, the best leaders that I've observed or work with actually realize that how they show up, in their next interaction is truly a leadership act.
Mm-hmm.
And they take each interaction captive.
Yeah. I like it. All right. We're going to jump into how this all started for you, because you mentioned you've been working on this for 4 years. What inspired you to start exploring the concept of mattering in the workplace? Where did this all begin?
A little bit was born out of frustration because the data had been mounting, right? More people than ever reported that they were feeling quote unquote invisible in work. I think 30% of people in a Work Human study found that. Work Human found that 30% of people said they felt invisible. 27% felt flat out ignored. Almost 47% of people societally said they felt forgotten. Loneliness kept increasing despite loneliness being named an epidemic. Despite self-help books published skyrocketing. If I were to put a graph up of self-help books published and anxiety and depression rates, you'd see them go up together. Despite the fact that everybody told us to connect more, despite the fact that Americans spend 3 times more time in meetings than in 2020. We're more connected. We have more access to personal development resources. We have more access to each other than ever, yet we're still lonely and we still feel invisible. And when I was thinking about that and thinking about my work, it really boiled down to this concept that has been in the realm of psychology for the last 40 years, and it's that people don't feel that they matter. It's not necessarily that people don't feel connected. It's that the quality of those connections are suffering. Like, for example, when we look at the research on loneliness, the opposite of loneliness is not having more people around you. It's feeling seen, heard, valued, and needed by the people around you. But I can't do that for myself. I can't get myself out of my own loneliness, that means. Because it takes 2 people to build a quality relationship. And so I was like, something's missing. What's missing is our responsibility to one another to solve these mental health issues, to solve our engagement issues in work, to solve our epidemic of insignificance. And that's what really led me to pull all of this together, all of our research together, and write this book, to show people that this is also a skill that we can learn and hone, and that I think we must. And it's an answer really to the crises of our time.
Yeah. You talk a lot about like the transactional interactions and how we're kind of deferring to that. Can you share a little more about what that means with our listeners?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things going on. One is, for the past 25 years, we have been able to communicate with each other via short digital transactions. So, Mel, if you give me some bad news, I can send you a sad-faced emoji. and just say, hey, I'm sorry to hear that. And right when I hit send, I don't have to think about you again that day. Instead, if we didn't have phones, I had to sit with you, sit in that discomfort. I had to deeply understand what you were going through. Empathy is a learned skill. And then I also would have to show you compassion, which is another skill. Listening, empathy, and compassion, all in that interaction that we no longer have to be in, because I can send you a short little transaction. So one of the things that's been happening that we don't even know is happening is that as we've used our devices and platforms to communicate with one another in short transactions, our skills, our social learning to actually show the person across from us how they matter, those skills have been withering. We're not getting the social repetitions anymore. And so we're worse at it than we are. So that's one major factor right now that is driving this. What was your question again?
It was just like what is happening in the workplace,
So
right? Like
yeah,
you talk a lot about like these impersonal transactional interactions that we have, because something that stood out to me was this: we could be in constant meetings all day and still feel like we're not valued or seen, even though we're in
yes,
constant human interaction. So I was like, oh, but we have these transactional moments that just don't have the same weight.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So one reason is we're relying on digital devices and digital platforms, and we're losing the skills to actually see, hear, value, and show each other how they're needed. The second point of that is that we're in a hurry more than ever, because now, because of our connectedness, we can do things faster. And so a lot of us are passing each other by. We're getting on virtual calls and we have a whole browser full of tabs up. And instead of like engaging with the person who jumps on early in that in between space, we put our cameras on mute and we just go along and answer another email instead of checking in on how somebody's doing. Managers, for example, on average, they're spending just about 23% of their time with their people. Studies show the rest is on administrative tasks, strategic tasks, or other bigger organizational tasks. And the big problem is when that lack of skill development that we've been seeing via our overuse of technology combines with our lack of time and attention, you get this epidemic of insignificance that we're seeing now. So the call for us is to create space and time to see, hear, value people again. But we can't do that without relearning the skills to do that. So I think we need a mass reskilling of the skills to see, hear, value, and show each other how they're needed. And at the same time, we need to redesign our systems to make those behaviors possible.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Francesca.
Can I make a side note story? So a
Yes.
couple of years ago, I got really on this whole kick around watching like period pieces, like Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. And there's these scenes, right, where someone like gets the piece of paper and the pen and they're writing a letter. And it's BBC, so of course it's not like, whatever. And it's just taking for frickin' ever. And I'm like, I realized in this moment that I'm watching someone do something very long form, time consuming. The way it was filmed in my mind was also very long form and time consuming. And I realized even something as simple as writing a letter, which I used to do quite a bit, a handwritten letter just felt like way too much work, way too much work. And it was one of those things where it's like, but every letter I still have, for example, I still have thank you letters from bosses from 15 years ago, even though I know that the magnitude of that is huge. It's like I've come to realize that I've been living in a world where like everything is short form. Everything is short form in terms of communication and even the way I communicate as a leader.
This is a very important point
Thank you.
because hurry and care can't coexist.
No, they can't. Yes, tell me
you
more.
you
No.
can't you cannot care for anything if you're in a hurry. Anything. I mean, whether it's a house plant, if you don't understand the house plant, take the time to understand where it needs to be, how much water it needs, the light it needs. If you don't understand that, you're not going to care for it. You're not going to be able to care for it. To care for something takes understanding. And to understand something takes time and it takes space. Very difficult to care for anything if you're in a hurry. And a lot of the things, like when we ask people, tell us about when you most feel that you matter to other people. No one has still, and we've like thousands of people we've asked this question to. No one has said when someone gave me a gift, when someone gave me more money, when somebody gave me some big thing, right? Everything they talk about is something that cost that other person time and attention.
Yeah. I believe it.
And that is it, right? Slowing down, um, remembering something that I was struggling with something and checking in with me. Slowing down to write a thank you note, not just to write a thank you note, but write down exactly what they saw in me and why they're thanking me. Um, slow down to actually take the time to pick up the phone and check in instead of just sending the text being like, thinking of you today, which is all great. All that stuff is great. But all of the things people tell me that create a sense of mattering for them cost someone else's time and attention.
So it's so funny. Well, we used to do well, when I was working with Francesca at Deloitte, I used to do handwritten thank you notes to all of my facilitators for learning programs for the time they spent. And they would come back. It was really hard to get facilitators to join us. That one action, I never had a problem getting facilitators for my program just by recognizing the time they took away from their busy schedules just to contribute to other people's development. That one little act.
Yes.
Double down on this because so much of the book and is about like going through life as a human and this need to be seen, or feel significant, right? And I want to make sure people understand when you're talking about mattering, what exactly are you talking about? Because there's a ton of terms being thrown around, like mattering, like belonging, mattering, like self-esteem, but that's not it. What is mattering?
Mattering is feeling significant to the people around you that comes from feeling valued by them and then knowing exactly how you add value to them. Different than feeling like you belong, So I have a 10 and a 7-year-old. So elementary school recess drama, very high
Very
on
high.
the high narrative right now in this household. And I liken it like this. Belonging is, being picked for the team. It's being, hey, you're here. You're welcome here. And let's connect you with people here. Inclusion, and we've heard that word a lot. Inclusion is being able to and asked to play in the game. But mattering is feeling that the team wouldn't be complete without you. Mattering is feeling significant to the individuals on that team, which is powerful because mattering is a interpersonally constructed concept. So I could feel like I belong on this call, like welcomed and accepted here, but not feel seen and heard by you. I don't. That's not happening. I could feel like I belong in a meeting or
What are we
belong in an
doing?
organization, and I could even feel represented and that my identity is included in the conversation. But you may not notice that my parent is in the hospital and my energy's low. You may not notice that I feel left out of discussions that day, or that I'm frustrated with something that's going on at work. Or I may not feel that you can actually name my unique gifts and how I uniquely contribute, but I may feel like I belong and I'm included.
Right.
And
Right.
so mattering is different. It's feeling significant to the people around you. And it comes from feeling valued by them, but then knowing how you add value to them.
And I'm wondering, like, especially in the workplace, because I know at a human level, this has massive benefits. Specifically in the workplace, though, when employees feel like they matter, when they reach that third tier, yes, belonging, yes, inclusion, but now they're up at mattering, where they understand their significance and what they contribute, right? What happens at work when they matter?
The original title of my book was Mattering Comes First. And the reason why it was titled that was because when you look down the path, right, to when we were born as human beings, and this is how I start the book, the first thing that we do is we reach out to be significant to someone else.
That killed me, by the way.
We,
I
but
can't.
we,
That's so
we,
like.
but we have to, and I'm going to bring this into work though in a second, because
Sorry.
we have to realize that what we're talking about here, something that is a survival instinct at its core. It is not just a psychological need. This is what's different about mattering. It is a psychological instinct. It is a biological instinct that turns into a psychological need. The biological instinct is that nobody would be listening to this podcast right now if at some point we all hadn't mattered enough to someone else to keep us alive. That primal drive, turns into this fundamental need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed by others. And we carry that with us into work. This is why, psychological safety, the big popular term right now, psychological safety is being able to speak up without fear of retaliation, being able to share your voice, your perspectives without fear that you'll be shunned by the group.
Safety.
All that is mattering in disguise. It's knowing that we have somebody that we already matter to enough that we can go out, experiment, take risks, share our voice, and that won't ever be at risk. That's why children thrive when they're in households where they feel important to an adult. They can go out, experiment, take risks, build relationships because they know nothing's going to threaten the belief that they matter to that parent. One of the things that I look for when I go to a family's house, is if their kids are being loud in front of them, because it shows me that they know that they have someone to come back to. Now, the reason why this is so important in work is because adult attachment, it carries with us, right? That need to feel secure and safe within our relationships. And when we feel that in work, when somebody truly values us, there's two beliefs that develop. The belief that I'm worthy, which is called self-esteem, and the belief that I'm capable, which is called self-efficacy. Research finds repeatedly that those two beliefs are necessary for human performance. So high-performing individuals in an organization believe they're worthy and they believe they're capable. Very difficult to sustainably perform if you don't have those two beliefs. The number one predictor of both of those beliefs is a supportive relationship characterized by positive verbal reinforcement. So for a leader listening, the byproducts of feeling that you matter are profit, productivity, performance, all of those things, because people feel valued enough that they know they're worthy and they're capable enough to add value. And all of those things are byproducts of human energy that we want. And the ultimate regenerator of human energy is to make sure people know they're worthy and they know they're capable. And that's what creating mattering does.
Yeah. Like the lagging indicators, productivity, outcomes, the leading indicator matter.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. And I would, I love people like critiquing and being skeptical of this. I think that's really healthy. But if you are right now, I want you to think about the last time you were energized to do something when you didn't feel that it mattered or you mattered.
Here's a question for you, because one of the things Mel and I are deep in the research, specifically around the boss-employee relationship, right? And we're wanting to fix that relationship. And we have,
good.
And one of the things that that has become very clear is this only works if it's a two-way relationship, and you're not in a transactional relationship, you're in a relationship, right? So we have a whole thing and a framework and all this good jazz. One of the things that we've found is that every once in a while you come across either an employee or a boss that for some random reason, they do not want to be in a reciprocal relationship. They want this to be transactional.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in those situations if you have a boss, for example, that operates very transactionally, that is not going to give you what you need from a mattering perspective?
Well, a lot of people ask me, what do I do if my leader doesn't do this for me? And I always ask them, do you do it for them?
Two-way. Yeah.
It's two-way, right? Yeah, it's this idea. It's actually in psychology, it's called the complementarity principle. We have these phrases for everything. But basically what it means is that, say your boss isn't asking you anything about your life or the details of your life or your work, or they don't understand you. And what could happen if you start asking them about the details of their work, checking in on how they're doing? Very likely, because of human psychology, over the next week or two, they'll start asking you. This is a very difficult notion because someone has to go first.
Yeah. And I think there's this idea that the boss sets the tone, right, for the relationship. But that's, again, you're a human to human. And if you want something, you need to be able to put it out into the universe first,
Someone has to go first. And by the way, that 30% of people who don't feel seen at work, that includes your boss. And when people feel insignificant, two things typically happen. They either withdraw. So your boss could be actually acting out in withdrawal, like not wanting to invest because, what I do here doesn't matter to my boss. So why should I do it? Or they might be acting out in desperation and sort of defiance. I mean, I don't, I'm trying to exert control. I think this is what you see a lot now. I'm trying to exert control because I don't feel that I matter. So I'm trying to control whatever it is that I can control. So I would say, going first is very powerful. To return a kindness, someone has to initiate a kindness.
I find too, like I keep seeing even today I saw, bosses are done being nice, right? You see there's this, did you see that? I which I always find very interesting. Yes, we're absolutely seeing a lot of stories around command and control, butts and seats, return to office, like the power has shifted, as you started this podcast with, back to the employers. To your point, it will shift again. And even though we can talk about pendulums all day and we can talk about command and control, but everything comes back to the relationship you have with your peers, with your bosses, with your teammates. And it's just like, can you take the first step to make this better? It doesn't seem like it takes a lot to do that.
No, it does not take a lot to do that, but it does take intention, it takes attention, and it takes skill. I would also say a lot of bosses that don't do this don't know how to do it.
Or they never had it. Do you find that, but like a lot of
Yeah.
people just, they weren't raised this way professionally too? So they
Well,
like,
they were never developed. I mean, the majority of organizations that I work with do not have standard leadership development training that focuses on relational skill building and giving people the social repetitions to develop these relational skills. When we don't know how to do something, our natural reaction is defensiveness. Like if someone says, "Hey, you should start eating better," and then I don't get any instruction or guidance or support, and I type into Google how to eat better, and I see all like a million different things, I'm just like, oh, forget it. So-and-so doesn't know what they're talking about, right? When we are told to do something and we don't know how to do it, it's very frustrating. Or another thing that's very frustrating for leaders right now is knowing they should do something and being in an environment that makes it impossible for them to do it. So a manager who's overscheduled, who has no time in their schedule to actually check in with their employees, and then you send them to a psychological safety workshop and they don't have the time or environmental ability to do that, that is maddening for a human being. And it often results in defiance.
Yeah.
can't be another thing added to their plate.
Right.
Got it.
But that is why I will say this. I know we talked about hurry and care and all of that. And if I were to change one thing I wrote in the book, there was a section that said make time and space, create space and make time. I would have crossed that out and say, don't make time, use time, because we can't create time as humans. But one of the things that I did observe with the people that I studied was that it's not them adding interactions to their plate, adding meetings, adding touch points. It's actually what they do in the interactions they already have. Great leaders tend to optimize interactions, the passing by, the transitional moments in the day, using those transitions as checkpoints. The point where somebody gets on a call early or is leaving a call, or after a call. If I saw that one of you was frustrated, instead of just ending the meeting and saying, "Hey, I'll catch up with them next week," calling and saying, "Hey, I noticed you were frustrated. What's going on? You okay? Is that right? Did I get that right? Are you frustrated?" Those are the things that actually separated great leaders that did do this for others, not they're adding more time. It's how they use that time.
Oh, so much I want to talk to you about, but I want to turn it over to Mel so she can. Mel, take it away. Otherwise, I'm going to take us off on a tangent.
Well, I know we've gotten into why mattering matters, but I wanted to maybe dive a little deeper into it because you mentioned there's this massive kind of mattering deficit. And at the end of your book, you also, there was a quote, and I think was it a Navajo proverb? And then you added your own: always assume people around you feel unseen, undervalued, and lonely, and act accordingly. And I wanted, what are the consequences if organizations don't start to nurture this? Whether you're an employee or a leader, right? Because it's really important for leaders, but also if you're just a day-to-day employee, it sounds like this is an everybody issue. So what are the consequences if we don't start to address this systemically in an organization?
Yeah, there's a couple of signs that you can see happening when people feel insignificant. And I mentioned these earlier, but people either withdraw or they act out in desperation. Quiet quitting, for example, that trend of doing the bare minimum just to get by, was the inevitable withdrawal response to a group of workers, a generation who felt unseen, unsupported by people. It was not the result of a lazy, entitled generation. People do not disengage because they're lazy. They disengage because they don't feel that they matter. I mean, that's very clear in the engagement research. So withdrawal, isolating, withholding information, not speaking up, learned helplessness, being conditioned by your environment that you can't, won't, and never will matter, no matter what you say. Sometimes that results in something louder, which are acts of desperation, complaining, blaming, gossiping, protesting. A lot of the toxic behaviors that leaders complain about are actually their very creations. Because when people feel insignificant, they act out in desperation. Gossip, for example, negative workplace gossip, if you look at the predictors of that, there are two. One is called psychological contract violation. That means that my expectation of fair treatment from you was violated, so I'm going to speak up to someone else. What that really means is that I don't have that secure relationship, so I'm going to do whatever it takes to create one. So if I can't speak up to you, I will speak out to someone else. So negative workplace gossip, it's just one example of how these things manifest, or acting out, attention-seeking behaviors like disagreeableness, for example. Disagreeableness, the trait of disagreeableness, is one of the most common outcomes of perpetual experiences of not mattering in one's life. So a lot of these things we label as quote unquote toxic or difficult people. In my practice, I've seen the most difficult employees are usually the most unseen, unheard, and unvalued and misunderstood. So as an organization, and let's bring it back to this whole bossism thing. The boss is done being nice. It is antithetical, just for all of the people listening that may be tempted to follow that because it's easier. It's easier to dehumanize people and make a lot of money faster. That's the easy way to do it. But it doesn't usually last. It is antithetical to everything we know about human motivation and performance to treat people like they're replaceable. When people feel replaceable, they'll act replaceable. They won't show up, they will not commit. When people feel irreplaceable, they act irreplaceable. So if you're going to go back to treating people as just a number, just a resource, just a means to your end, they will act like that. And I promise you will have a labor problem in the next 5 years.
Amen to that, because Francesca and I saw a really gross LinkedIn post on Friday. That startup guy. This can get cut if we want to, but we saw the startup guy essentially doing that.
There's a whole tone, and I have quite a few friends that have worked in startups in Silicon Valley, and I won't say where I worked as well, but like there's this idea of like it's this kind of bro Silicon Valley culture. No offense to bros, but it's like this is startup culture, and if you can't handle it, get out. You know, it's a very
to treat people poorly.
Yeah, and it's an excuse. Yeah, it absolutely is. But it's prevalent, and it's like this whole Elon Musk sleep here because we're on a mission. And if you're not part of it, you're weak. If you can't handle it, you're weak.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that all of the research says it's actually the shittiest way to run a company, and that's probably why most startups don't make it anyway, right? But it's very much this us against them, big corporate versus startup, and if you can't handle it, there's something wrong with you.
Also, the HubSpot, was it the CHRO or CEO who came out to say she doesn't have the Sunday scaries because she works on Sundays? And I hate to see that narrative starting to come back full circle, or like the 100-hour work week. I don't know. There's something.
Yeah, I'd imagine that she doesn't feel like she matters.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah,
honestly. And again, exerting control. And to be honest with you, when it's the easy way out is to dehumanize. That's how we brought on the Industrial Revolution, right? If I work as exchange, if I just pay you enough money to tolerate enough, I have to get that equilibrium right. I'll pay you enough to suffer enough where you don't complain and you keep coming back. And that's all I need to keep running. That is the ethos of the industrial age. And it worked in a lot of ways in terms of our production level. But what it did is it completely eroded the human spirit. And we had a lot of spiritless specialists out there who were doing a lot of technical work, but they lost that spirit. Now, what happened in 2020 was that people like had stopped and they had time. And they saw a bunch of people around them losing their lives. And when we see that, we get these little death nudges, these mortality nudges. We always start thinking, "Oh gosh, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why why me? Why here? Why now?" And moments like that, I think I know we're 5 years removed from that moment, But the repercussions of that moment aren't going away. I mean, people are not going to, in the long run, tolerate being dehumanized for an extra 25 cents on the hour. It's just we're not going back, even if the bosses want us to go back.
Yeah, it's not worth the price. It's very costly.
Reminds me of
Walk
that
us
Mad
through.
Men comment where it's like, that's what I pay you for. Like, do you remember that episode? Or yeah, it's like,
Yeah, this is. Can
Yeah.
I comment on that real quick?
yes, please.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the Madman episode is like, I never. She says, I never get thanked, and he says, that's what the money's for, right? And people say this to me all the time. Well, Zach, the way I thank people, show them they matter, is through their money. It is very important to recognize a symbol of value is money. You can use money as a symbol to value somebody, but money is an inanimate object. It cannot value a person. It cannot do the act of valuing a person. Only people can. So that's why these symbols of value cannot replace being valued by another person.
You got to do the work to value. Like, you're the only other person that can say, yep.
And the other thing with this whole mattering thing and the bosses, I don't know who the bosses are we're talking about right now, but the people who think that, we should go back to this hardened way of managing people as resources. That again, you will motivate people. If you want to do this, you'll motivate people until their next pay increase. Right. And that's it. If you do this, if you just keep saying, hey, work hard and we'll give you this bonus, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. You're just riding this roller coaster of motivation, which is why a lot of these startups have talent problems and they're always churning talent.
Because they're all working from the old carrot stick model versus actually giving a shit.
Yeah. Well, and some of their founders are complete D-bags too. So there you go.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Excuse my term.
So you talked about, and if I get this wrong, I apologize. Well, when I read it, I was like, oh, the NAN framework. And I was thinking of my Nana, like a Nan, like it's your Nan taking care of you sort of kind of feeling. But could you explain to our listeners what that is? And like NASA, you mentioned NASA's laddering and how they use this. Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, I'll give a couple examples because the framework are 3 practice areas and their associated skills that people need to have to show the next person they interact with how they're significant. And the 3 practice areas are noticing people, making sure they feel seen and heard, affirming people, making sure people know how their unique gifts make a unique difference, and then showing people how they're needed, making sure people feel irreplaceable, indispensable, and that their work is non-disposable. So when it comes to noticing people, I'll give you one practice example there. Noticing is deliberately paying attention to the details, ebbs and flows of someone's life and work, and offering an action to show them that you saw them or that you heard them. One of my favorite stories, again, comes from a leader in a distribution center, and I got asked to go work with them, and they were all disengaged except for her team, and I just asked her what she did there. And she pulls out this notebook. She had a stack of notebooks. And she said 3 years ago, she was having a lot of trouble keeping track of her big team and all of the details of their work. So she would write their names down on this notebook on Friday and then write down one thing she heard them talk about, complain about, piece of equipment that wasn't working, a sport that their kid was starting. And she would just write it down. And then on Monday morning, she would look at the notebook. She started her week like that and schedule a 3-minute check-in with each of them and ask about something on that list. So she would say something like, Mel, I noticed last week that you asked to get that piece of equipment fixed. Did we get that fixed for you? Or I remember this weekend, your kid was starting baseball for the first time. How did it go? And she told me that, Zach, there's magic in being remembered. And this is not a practice that I came up with, but I was studying noticing and I was like, oh my gosh, like that is it, right? That's an elegant practice, the practice of noting. So that's one example. And then the affirming piece is showing people the difference that they make, actually visibly showing them. What we found is that the leaders who do this really well is they give people the indisputable evidence of their significance. What I mean by that is they don't just tell people that they matter, they show them exactly how they matter. We had a National Park Service crew that we were working with, and they had a manager, and he was great. They all loved him, and I wanted to figure out why, so I observed him for a couple of days. And he said, Zach, it's really simple. I take this around, and he holds up his phone, and I take pictures of all the projects they worked on that week, and I send them an email on Friday morning that just says, look what you did. And I attach the photos every week, right? Showing somebody the difference. And then the final piece is showing people how they're needed. And the example that you brought up was NASA. And when John F. Kennedy was going to the Space Center to launch the Apollo missions to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade, he caught up with a janitor. And he said to the janitor, "Hey, what do you do here?" And the janitor very calmly said, "Oh, I'm putting a person on the moon." It's a nice feel-good story. But as I was finishing my first book, there was a researcher at the Wharton School named Andrew Carton, and he actually was trying to figure out how NASA got 300,000 people, some of them doing very small jobs like sewing lunar lander parachute seams, to transporting goods, to being a custodian, to being an astronaut, to being a chemist, how they got all of those contract workers, 300,000 of them, to feel that they were needed for a mission that no one knew was possible. Talk about a management challenge. And what they found was that on blackboards, looking at photos on blackboards in the NASA facilities, they all had a ladder to the moon for every work group that showed the individual, their task. And then on the bottom rung of the ladder, the next rung up on the ladder was the objective, the measurable objective that task and that person was needed for. The next rung up was the objective that objective was needed for, all the way up to putting a person on the moon by the end of the decade. So they could see every single day how they were measurably indispensable to something important, which makes people feel important.
Yeah, that's a real powerful image to see every single day when you show up to work.
Every single day, here's measurably how you're needed. And another thing that a lot of the people we interview say is that when they feel that they matter, the person who's making them feel that way says some version of these 5 words: "If it wasn't for you." I don't think there's anything more powerful really as a human being than knowing that our presence and our absence means something to just one other person.
Well, isn't it the whole thing around like exes too? I mean, not to be totally weird about it, but don't we all secretly hope when we like quit a job or we have an ex, like I bet they're still thinking of me, or this place is going to blow up without
Absolutely.
me, right? We all want that feeling of like wanting, needed, remembered, legacy.
That goes back to that. I mean, and that's the remnants of that survival instinct. And to be honest, that turns into that need to be seen, need to be heard, need to be valued, need to be needed, relied on. I mean, we're interdependent as human beings. Like we're made to be interdependent. We are like who we are because of others. That's very hard for us to realize in our Western individualistic society, but interdependence isn't an opinion or a philosophy. It's a biological fact.
Yeah. Rely on community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you can't survive without community. I don't know who can.
No, but think about the amount of time we focus on helping people to actualize themselves. Like if I look at the bestseller list for the in self-help personal development, you will see almost every single book on that list. They're all great, right? But the problem is that they all help you deal with something that's been inflicted on you by others. And so one of the things we've under-indexed on and underdeveloped is our responsibility for how the next person we interact with leaves that interaction and what it does for their mental health. And I truly believe, I mean, the only way to solve our mental health crisis, the only way to solve our disengagement crisis, the only way to solve our quote unquote loneliness epidemic is through interactions and people taking responsibility for each other's mental health and mental well-being through making sure they get that initial instinct that they had when they were born met, which is to be seen, heard, valued by someone else.
I've been through a lot of therapy and also I'm trending on woo-woo. And I know, Zach, at this point in the conversation, you're like, where the hell is she going with this? And let me tell you, the question is this idea that you have to do the work, right? Or you have to have enough self-awareness that it is your responsibility. If you want that, you need to be the one to start it. Like if you want that kind of energy given back to you, you need the one to be able to give it. And what's interesting is I've led very large organizations. I've led a lot of teams. I feel like I have really tried to see people and meet people where they are, to do some of the things, although I picked up a lot of things in your book that I will be using. So thank you very much for that. But there are points in time where I feel like I keep giving. And then I feel like, quite honestly, there's a lot of people on my team where I'm like, I think you need some therapy. I think I think you can't
Absolutely.
give that to me. And I'm curious about if someone's like managing a team and like, is there a point where you keep giving and you keep seeing and that person's never going to show up to play? Or are there situations where like, what do they need to be looking out for as they're trying this, right? Does this make any sense? I hope it does.
It does. Number one, I mean, yes, we're not taught. If this is people need to do personal work. There's no doubt about it. I think the problem is that we've given people too much work to do
No kidding. Tell me more.
because of the relationships and our lack of responsibility for one another. Like, I think people should do personal work, and they need to do the personal work, and therapy is so important for people who need it. But for example, like a lot of people say to me, Zach, well, what if I work with a narcissist or this or that?
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
chances are you don't. I mean, less than 1% of the world is a clinical narcissist. So chances are you're working with somebody who's is exhibiting environmentally created behaviors. And you're part of that environment. So that requires understanding. So there's that, but the personal work is important. But the second thing you mentioned is, what if someone doesn't come to play? Like, now we have to assume that you've made the choice to lead, and you have to assume that that person, if that person isn't reassigned, or you don't say, hey, this is just not working out, you're not actually fulfilling the responsibilities of this role, then, and you don't offboard that person, which is a totally valid thing to do in that situation if someone's not responding, and they're still under your care, I don't think we can give up on people. And I think we give up on people too quickly. Because if they're under your care as a leader, they're under your care.
I think though there's a really important distinction though. You can still care about someone and recognize that maybe this place isn't for them. I'm not saying rush to get off board them.
Absolutely.
But I think
Yes.
that's really important because I feel like I've seen a lot of people keep trying and trying and trying, and I'm like, maybe it's not a good fit. Maybe it's like, let's be honest with what the situation is so you can continue to give care, and you can also preserve your energy to give care to the rest of the team as well. Like that's where I was like, where's
Right.
the
But I do think we tend to give up on people too quickly. 2, 3, 4 years is not long in a human being's development.
I
And
just feel
oftentimes
yeah.
I hear leaders that say, "Oh, I do this for them, and they're not coming around. Nothing's working." And I say, "Well, how long have you been working with them?" And they'll be like, 2.5 years. I'm like, 2.5 years, 2.5 years of a human being's like 70-year life, and they haven't quite turned around yet for you as a leader. I think that we give up on people too quickly, and I think that the solution can't be, I'm going to stop investing in this person. And here's why: because other people around you see that, and other people around you say, oh, my leader, this person's hard, my leader stopped investing in them, so I'm going to stop investing in the next hard person that I get to interact with. That's what we do here. And so then you get this situation where, and I've seen this all the time, where you get labels. This is a difficult employee. This is a toxic employee. And the moment we label somebody is the moment we actually cease caring for them and understanding them. Because your brain categorizes someone as difficult, you will see everything they do as difficult, no matter what they do. It's a recency bias. It's a bias with confirmation bias. It's classic. And so this is a human being who's a beloved parent, a brother, a sister, a best friend, a community member who's behaving in ways that I perceive as difficult. And I think that if we focus on that, we focus on deeply trying to understand relentlessly if that person's still under our care, I think that's the responsibility of leadership.
Yeah. Which is funny because we're operating on like 90-day performance improvement plans.
Exactly. I think exactly. And on a performance plan, one of the things that, the research is very clear on is that about 40% of performance improvement feedback conversations actually decrease performance.
I believe it. Well, people
And,
know. People know. They're
but
like, so it's
yeah, and the number one reason why is that the person that's receiving it doesn't feel cared for by the person giving it, because it is, no matter your critique will not matter to me if I don't feel that I matter to you. It doesn't matter how well worded it is. Doesn't matter how many workshops you go to on how to give critical feedback. Trust is impossible without care. And so I won't trust even your performance review or performance improvement plan if I don't feel that my voice and I'm understood by you. And so I think that we tend to critique before we deeply care. We tend to evaluate before we deeply understand. And you're right. We're on two short-term horizons with human beings who are living complex lives. Like 2 years in a person's life is not that long.
Question. You know how you talk about people talk about like regular real world marriages versus celebrity marriages and like what constitute a long marriage versus like for regular folks versus celebrity folks, and like, oh well, it was 5 years and that's pretty long for celebrities. So when you think of like someone's lifetime, I know this is a terrible analogy. I am so sorry, Zach. You're like, who the hell are these
No,
people?
this is good. This is good.
Sorry. Yeah.
So sorry for who we are. Okay, so
Don't say sorry for who you
I'm
are.
trying to
Don't
make
ever apologize.
trying to make a point here. So when you like, I get your whole concept about like, okay, this 2 years and someone's 70 years is a very short span. But is there like your real outdoor life and then your work life? And does it change? Like, does that time frame change at all? Because it's like in this work environment, in the average time someone is in a workplace marriage versus their lifetime, whatever, is much shorter. Does that impact anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just changes the scale of it, but we spend the majority of that lifespan in work,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So how we're making meaning of our whole lives really occurs in work, even if people try to tell us we can compartmentalize it. You can't, right? How you make meaning in work is how you make meaning in life. I think that what I'm trying to say is that I think that one of the things that happens is, and I think, Francesca, you got this right. Like we're on a we're short-term thinkers. We have this short-termism in organizations that I need to just enhance performance by this date. I need to get numbers up by this date, and we are very reactive. And being proactive and doing the relational groundwork that makes anything else happen in an organization is what takes time and what takes attention. And I would say that, again, like for leaders who tell me, Zach, they can't get through to this person, they're not developing. And then I say, okay, are they leaving or are they staying? And if they say they're staying, then you can't give up on them.
Super
If they're
fair.
leaving and you're helping them leave and supporting them in leaving, that's okay. That's very valid. That's an act of care in a lot of cases if it's done well. But if they're staying and they're under your care, they're under your care.
Yeah.
Damn right.
It's responsibility.
All right.
We are a few minutes over. Do you have 5 minutes to just
Yes,
go through?
let's go.
Okay. What's so for everyone listening today, if they only take away one thing, if like say they need to start implementing part of that, the NAN, I'm going to keep calling it the NAN, like everyone's NAN. I don't know, for some reason the care of a grandma came to my mind when I heard this framework. If they can do one thing starting today, what should they be doing?
I would ask the people that you lead or the people that you like are doing life with, ask them, when you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? What am I doing? And then take note of that and do more of that. Likely it will fall into the noticed, affirmed, and needed framework, but I'm less concerned with the framework and more concerned with you understanding how people feel significant to you in your life and in your work and doing more of those things so they feel that way.
One powerful question.
One powerful question. And then I'm going to add a second thing. I know you asked one thing. The second thing is that think about your next interaction you'll have after listening to this podcast and what's something you need to notice more about that person. Could you ask them a question about it? Is there something you're grateful for that that person does that you feel grateful for, but you haven't told them? Do you rely on that person? And when's the last time you actually told them? I mean, think about this. Think about a person in your life who you rely on. We all have those people. Now think about the last time you explicitly told. Oftentimes there's a big gap between how much we feel towards somebody on our teams, how much they matter to us, and our behaviors of creating mattering. But you can close that gap in your next interaction.
And I guess anyone can do this, right? So when you think, regardless of your role, whether you're a leader, individual contributor, you can ask this question to your teammates and people around you and create that culture of mattering. Even if you're not necessarily getting it, you can start creating it.
Absolutely. And then just blame it on us. Blame it on this podcast. If it's awkward for you, I mean, seriously, a lot of people struggle with doing this because it feels quote unquote inauthentic or awkward if they haven't showed up like this for many years. I work with a lot of leaders who, when we go through some of the work on mattering, they start feeling like, oh my gosh, I have been driving so hard for the last 10 years to keep this business afloat that I've forgotten to do this. And they can feel guilty. And so that happens a lot. This is not what this is about. And this is uncomfortable for you. Just say, hey, I listened to this conversation about making sure people feel that they matter. And it really hit me that I need to do that more. And so I'm going to start asking you some different type questions that than they're used to. My goal is to help you feel seen here. That's a non-negotiable. But let me know how it's coming across. Let me know if these are working. Let me know if this is how you feel that you matter here. And let's do this together. I'm going to try it. So what's non-negotiable is that everybody here feels noticed, affirmed, and needed. But I want to let you in on this is why I'm doing this. And I think as a leader, when you let people in on your good intentions, they're very tolerant of mistakes and missteps and awkwardness and all of the things that come along with being a good human to other humans.
We're going to share all your socials. But if folks want to stay on top of everything that's coming out of your research on mattering, how can they best stay connected with you? Where should they stay connected
Yeah,
with you?
you can go to zachmercurio.com and then you can navigate to this section that says learn and then mattering. And there's all sorts of resources. There's a self-assessment you can download. There's a way to give a better thank you can download. There's ways to show people they're needed that you can just download and use right there.
We will link to that in the show notes as well. All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here, Zach.
Thank you for
I
this
appreciate you
research
all.
too.
Yeah.
You can use it in every touch point of your life. You can sure as hell use it at work, and it's so important. So important.
My pleasure. Thank you all for creating space to share it.
Yeah.